Okay, so in this video, we're basically going to be going over the first unit in meteorology here. We're not going to go too in depth in this video. We're basically going to kind of stick to a simple topic, but we're going to be introducing meteorology to everyone today. Now, my name is Andrew Heischman. I'm the lead forecaster here in WW116. I hope everyone is having a great day today. Now, I want to go ahead and mention that I am not a certified meteorologist. However, I have been studying the field of meteorology for about 5 years now, so I do have, quite an accumulated area of knowledge when it comes to the subject. But in today's video, we're basically going to be discussing, the differences between high and low pressure systems. I'm sure you've probably heard about those before. We're going to, briefly touch the subject on the jet stream, and we're basically going to be, talking about, what kind of conditions you can expect with areas of high pressure versus areas of low pressure. And we're basically going to be going over, what is the drive for all of the weather here on Earth. Like I said, we're going to start off with the big picture today. And, as this series does continue and as this series does move on, we are actually going to, go more in depth, eventually going down to, like thunderstorms and basically how they work and how to forecast. So eventually I want to touch up on those subjects as well. So in today's video, we're basically going to be, going over, like I said, the high, areas of high pressure and areas of low pressure. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on into it. So now the main driver for all of the weather here on Earth is, you probably have heard this, sometime in your meteorology class or your, even just in your science class here in, in grade school. But typically the, the main driver of all the weather here on Earth is actually due to the sun. Now, as you know, the sun, does beat down on the Earth. It heats up the surface. During the daytime it gets warmer. During the nighttime it gets cooler because you're not having that direct radiation from the sun to the Earth. It's not heating up the surface. So, essentially, the sun is what causes all the weather here on Earth. Now, we're going to talk about, evaporation and all the, condensation and stuff like that in this video too. So we'll just go ahead and, kind of start off with, the basics here. So we're going to draw the Earth here from, a side perspective. This is Earth as a whole. We're going to draw it from the land side of view. So we're looking at the Earth from the side view. So essentially the sun does beat down on the surface and it causes it to heat up. And basically we have water. The Earth is covered by mostly water. And essentially the sun heats up the water. And what happens whenever the sun heats up the water is it actually causes it to evaporate. Now, I'm sure you've heard of that before. I'm sure you probably know what evaporation is, but basically, it's the transfer of the water becoming from a liquid, it turns it into a gas. And gases, in terms of, water vapor, that's what we call, water that has been evaporated, is what we call water vapor. And basically, if you have a lot of water vapor in the atmosphere, it basically hints that the sun has evaporated a lot of water, but it also depends, it also basically shows that if you have a lot of water vapor, you can actually get what we call condensing to occur once this gas has risen into the cooler atmosphere above. So, we're going to go ahead and, if that was already confusing, like I said, you guys can actually leave comments down below. I'll be able to, maybe describe things a little bit better if you are having a little bit of trouble. But basically, in terms of that. So if you guys need any help, I will be sure to help you guys. So basically, what goes on is the sun heats up the surface of the water. It basically causes, the water to evaporate into a gas. And so the closer you are at the surface, the more warmer it is. The higher you go up, the temperature actually drops. And basically, also the pressure drops. The pressure gets lower. So for an example of that, if you've ever been on a mountain, you've probably realized that it's cooler on top of the mountain, and you've probably already realized that, like maybe your ears have popped whenever you go on the mountain. So the reason that your ears have popped on the mountain is actually due to the area of lower pressure. There's less air being pushed down on you. Now, if you're at the surface, we do have higher pressure, so there's more of the atmosphere kind of pressing down on you, increasing the overall pressure. And also, you're right there, where the the sun heats up the surface a lot more. So basically, the lower you go, the more the sun heats up, and basically, the higher the pressure is. So that's essentially what we're dealing with in terms of that. So going back to what we were talking about, so this water evaporates, right? It turns into water vapor. It starts to rise, and once it gets to those cooler, temperatures and up in the sky, it condenses. So basically the gas turns from a gas into a liquid again. in which it condenses into a cloud. So basically, you get all this evaporating water, all this water vapor starts to rise, and once it reaches a certain level, it'll actually condense. And the reason it condenses is because, it's transferring its energy from heat basically into cold. So there's kind of a, big gap between, there's a lot of interaction between warm temperatures and, cooler temperatures. You basically have to transfer their energy from one area to another, which it releases its energy by condensing into water vapor, or basically into, in water droplets, I mean. So these water droplets that accumulate create clouds. And if you have enough clouds, the cloud can actually get heavy, in which the natural, effect of gravity can pull down on it and actually cause it to rain, as if you get, a lot of water vapor in the upper atmosphere. So essentially, if you think about it, the sun heats up the surface, it causes everything to rise. It causes, the water vapor to rise, in which actually that creates an area of low pressure under where it's heating it up. So, for example, we'll go ahead and draw, we'll draw some sun rays here, kind of beating down here on the surface. This red line is the surface. So it's heating it up, right? Heating up the surface. This causes, some, the water to evaporate into gas form and wants to rise. So the upper atmosphere, it's cooler. So we're going to draw cool. And at the lower bits of the atmosphere, it's warm. The sun has heated up the, all the water that's on the surface and caused it to evaporate to the cooler air above, in which this actually, allowed for, a cloud to form, because it condenses into water droplets. So we'll go and draw a little cloud here. This is basically due to the evaporation of the water. So essentially, that's how all of that works. And what that does is it actually creates an area of low pressure under where all this water is evaporating from, in which we usually, on a quick note, we usually, typically see the, what low pressure symbol is, just basically a red L. So this is symbolizing, an area of low pressure. So, and basically due to this low pressure, the atmosphere wants to reach an area of equilibrium. So basically, it wants the atmosphere to be equal in all aspects. So what it will do is it will actually flow in, basically it'll flow in some air from all around it, essentially. So basically we'll have airflow moving into the area of low pressure. So I want you to know that winds flow from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure, okay? So basically we have this air that's rising, and we have basically the surrounding air is trying to fill in that void, fill in that gap. Okay, so this is actually me editing the video. I want to go ahead and pause this for a second, because I want you to realize that due to the, basically the air filling in that void, like I was talking about here a minute ago, essentially what that does is it creates a current at the surface, which we know as winds, because it's trying to fill in, the area of low pressure. It's, flowing from the outside inwards, which that's what creates winds. But anyways, let's get back to the video. As this is continuing to rise, causing this, all this water vapor to go up and eventually condense into a cloud. But like I said, if you had like a heavy amount of clouds, we'll go ahead and draw this cloud a little bit heavier or a little bit bigger. The forces of gravity actually pull down on the cloud, all these water droplets that are inside of it, like little raindrops and stuff, which actually causes it to rain. And so that's essentially what that does. So this is actually what we describe as an area of low pressure. And this is why usually, areas of low pressure, these are the ones that usually, influence storms. Usually with areas of low pressure, you basically have storms that go on. And of course, the opposite of low pressure is actually high pressure. Now, this is basically where you have more of the atmosphere pressing down on you. So essentially, basically the conditions, are more stable in what we call it. Basically, unstable conditions result into basically, activities of storms, and more stable basically, results into activity of, basically, more, better conditions, more stability. And basically, typically with high pressure systems, you usually have a nice day, associated with them. You have more of the atmosphere pressing down on you. So basically, instead of air rising, air is actually sinking, falling to the surface and spreading out in all directions. So essentially, it is the opposite to what an area of low pressure. So this is a diagram of area of low pressure. This is a diagram of an area of high pressure. So, but like I said, if you guys have any questions, if this is a little too difficult for you to understand, make sure you can leave a comment down below, and I'll make sure to basically get to the topic basically help you guys out as much as I can. But basically, high pressure, sinks air to the surface and basically spreads it out in all directions. Low pressure draws in air from all directions and lifts it up into the atmosphere. And basically, usually, along with, water vapor too, which then condenses once it reaches the cooler atmosphere above. So the higher you are up in the atmosphere, the cooler it is. The warmer the atmosphere is, the lower it is. So basically, that is how that works. Now, like I mentioned before, winds flow from high to low pressure, but they do that indirectly. So basically, what that means is they don't just flow directly from high to low pressure. But instead what they do is they kind of arc, between areas of high and low pressure. This is actually due to the rotation of the Earth. This is actually a phenomenon called the Coriolis Effect. Basically, it's, it kind of curves as the Earth spins around in circles. So essentially, areas of high pressure, they rotate clockwise here in the northern hemisphere. So you can imagine the air kind of pushing down, along this jet. And areas of low pressure move counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. So you can kind of, imagine a belt. So essentially the jet stream is just a belt of current. So it's basically a current belt. So the area of high pressure pushes it this way, drags it down. The area of low pressure catches it and lifts it back up. Another area of high pressure, basically drags it back up. And, it rotates clockwise. And then the area of low pressure catches it again as it's rotating counterclockwise. So I guess you can, and I hope you guys can kind of get what I'm trying to go by here. But generally, this is actually due by the Coriolis effect. So for another example, we're going to go ahead and draw an area of high pressure. So we're going to draw a big H. So usually the blue H stands for an area of high pressure. And we'll draw a red L, which stands for basically an area of low pressure. So basically for a more clearer view, so areas of high pressure, they rotate clockwise in the northern hemisphere. In areas of low pressure, they go counterclockwise, and in the northern hemisphere. This is the opposite, in the southern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, low pressure areas rotate clockwise, and high pressure areas rotate counterclockwise. But generally, the winds flow between them. So basically, you have your jet. It gets caught by the high area pressure, and it arcs it down, kind of like this. Area of low pressure catches it, and it does this. So essentially, this jet, this current that flows between your high and low, this is what we call the jet stream. So basically, the jet stream is just a high belt of concentrated winds, very, very strong winds in the upper atmosphere. So essentially, that is what the jet stream is. Now, this actually causes what we call troughs and ridges. So an area of low pressure is a trough. So basically, this is just the air dipping down. And then an area of high pressure is also known as a ridge. This is basically the air basically going up. So it's kind of, imagine like a ridge, like a mountain. So basically the hills represent high pressure and the troughs represent low pressure. So basically we have a depression, which is an area of low pressure, and we have a ridge, which is a area of high pressure. So I hope that kind of makes sense for you guys. I'm not trying to make it too difficult. I'm trying to make it, kind of easy for you guys to understand. But that's just essentially, basically what goes on inside of an area of high pressure and an area of low pressure. So now we're going to be going over the last bit of today's video. Like I said, we're not really going in too much for today. I just kind of want to, briefly touch the subject. And if you guys have any questions, I can just quickly follow up with you guys and before we move on. So I just want to make sure everyone kind of knows what we're talking about. So an area of high pressure, we'll go ahead and draw a blue H here. So usually an area of high pressure, deals with mostly sunny skies. Usually deals with, we'll say, pleasant conditions. So they're usually sunny. You don't really see rain. You can have rain showers in terms of high pressure, but generally with your storms, that's what low pressure is. But we're going to start out with high pressure. So high pressure usually deals with pretty pleasant conditions. This is due to the sinking air. So we'll say due to sinking air and more what we call stability. So basically things are stable. That means they are doing what they should. They're pretty much calm. And of course we have the low pressure. So this is essentially the complete opposite of what an high pressure area is. So this usually is dealt with a storm. So this, we'll go ahead and move this back to the black. So usually associated, I totally spelled that wrong, with an area, or sorry, this is usually associated with with a storm. So essentially, areas of low pressure are usually associated with storms. Go ahead and say with storms, leading to rainy days. So that's basically the difference between areas of high pressure and areas of low pressure. So basically, to go over what I said, basically from the beginning of the video. So basically, you get the sun that heats up the surface. It basically causes, the water to evaporate, causes it to turn from a liquid into a gas. It, basically rises up, and it basically releases its energy by condensing into water droplets. So basically, it's the form of the water vapor, basically the gas turning from a gas to a solid, from a gas to a liquid, which then, creates, water droplets. And if you have a lot of these water droplets, the gravity will pull down on them, which will actually cause the rain droplets to fall out of the clouds, which we know as rain. So that's basically, what causes there. So basically low pressure, basically ends up with air rising and the air around it to fill it in. And the opposite is high pressure, due to the air sinking and essentially, the spreading out in all directions. So usually, this is how you get storms, by the air rising. You get storms by air rising. You get basically calm conditions by air sinking. And essentially, you have this network, what we call, basically the jet stream. You have areas of high pressure and areas of low pressure that basically, they cause this big jet. This is what we call the jet stream. Basically, jet stream is powered by areas of high pressure and areas of low pressure. So basically, areas of high pressure rotate, clockwise, dragging it down. Areas of low pressure catch it, lifting it back up. And basically, it causes what we call troughs and ridges. Ridges being areas of high pressure, which is usually pleasant conditions. And we also have, basically areas of low pressure. This is what we call a trough. This is usually associated with, storms leading to rainy days. So basically, that's what we're dealing with our first episode in terms of meteorology. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to show some support, because these videos are kind of long to make, but generally I just want to help people out. I want to make sure people understand basically what's going on. If you have any questions, like I said, feel free to leave them down in the comment below, and I will be sure to get to them. But anyways, guys, my name is Andrew Heischman. I'm the lead forecaster here at NWW116, and I hope everyone has a great day.